Our global economy means that chemicals may be manufactured and used anywhere in the world. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, recently revised its hazard communication standard to align with the United Nations globally harmonized system of classification and labeling chemicals. Under the GHS, every chemical supplier will use the same verbiage, pictograms, and messages on their labels to convey hazards. Two significant changes contained in the revised standard require the use of new labeling elements and a standardized format for safety data sheets, formerly known as Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDS. We will take a closer look at those changes in this training session. Currently, every country has a different system for communicating chemical hazard information, with little or no consistency between the systems. Without global standards, different regions of the world use different symbols to communicate that a substance is hazardous. With the new GHS, Globally Harmonized System Standard, workers can better understand the hazards associated with a chemical, how to protect themselves, and what to do in the case of an exposure. GHS will also help to reduce the cost to governments and companies complying with different systems, enable better communication of chemical information, and increase international trade. Prior to the adoption of GHS, OSHA did not have any specifications for container labeling. As of June 1, 2015, all labels will be required to have the following elements: a product or chemical identifier, a supplier identifier, one or more pictograms, a signal word, hazard statements, and a precautionary statement. It is important to note that the information conveyed on a label will be consistent with the information contained on the SDS, or Safety Data Sheet. For example, the precautionary statement would be the same on the label and the SDS. It is important that workers understand how to use the label in the workplace. These labels are intended to provide an immediate visual reminder of chemical hazards. Labels make it easier to identify and understand how to properly store hazardous chemicals and how to quickly locate first aid information. Let's take a closer look at a sample chemical label. The product identifier, or name, that's used on the GHS label should match the product identifier used on the SDS. This product identifier lists the chemical identity of the hazardous substance. The name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or supplier of the product must be provided on the label. The pictogram will quickly display specific information and make warnings more noticeable and easier for employees to understand. Labels may not have blank or unfilled squares. The pictograms that are required on a particular label are determined by the hazard classification. OSHA has designated 8 pictograms under the new standard for application to our hazard category. This chart shows 9 pictograms. However, this environment pictogram is not mandatory. OSHA's required pictograms must be in the shape of a square set at a point and include a black hazard symbol on a white background with a red frame sufficiently wide enough to be clearly visible. A square red frame set at a point without a hazard symbol is not a pictogram and is not permitted on the label. Signal words are used to denote the hazard's degree of severity. One of these two signal words must appear on the label: danger for more severe hazard categories, or warning for less serious hazards. If the word danger appears on the label, the word warning will not appear. Hazard statements are based on the hazard classification of a chemical and describe the hazard associated with the chemical. A statement should be present for each type of hazard, and multiple similar statements may be combined. Precautionary statements are based on the hazard classification of the chemical. They describe recommended measures that should be taken to protect against hazardous exposures or improper storage or handling of a chemical. Precautionary statements include first aid procedures, and in the event of similar statements, labels are to include the one that contains the most protective information. The Safety Data Sheet, formerly known as the Material Safety Data Sheet, is the detailed source of information about the chemical. The SDS is a reference to help ensure a chemical is handled safely and that workers are protected. New safety data sheets will be organized using a specified order of information. The most important information will be listed in the first sections of the SDS. It is important to remember that employers are not required to classify chemicals. Chemical manufacturers are still required to update SDS information whenever there are changes. GHS establishes a standardized 16-section safety data sheet format with a prescribed sequence of information and consistent section headings. Section 1 is identification. Section 2, hazard identification. Section 3, composition or information on ingredients. Section 4, first aid measures. Section 5, firefighting measures. Section 6, accidental release. Section 7, handling or storage procedures. Section 8, exposure controls or personal protection. Section 9, physical and chemical properties. Section 10, stability and reactivity. And Section 11, toxicological information. Sections 12 through 16 are not mandatory, but cover ecological information, disposal consideration, transport information, regulatory information, and Section 16, which covers other information. Since label formats will be standardized, a worker will be able to quickly identify important information, for example, first aid measures, by referring to Section 4, regardless of the chemical that's being used. Or an employee with questions about appropriate PPE will always refer to Section 8. Although chemical manufacturers will have until June 1, 2015 to comply with the new rule, workers will soon begin to see the new labels and SDSs in their workplace. This is why it's critical that employees are trained and understand the changes and how they affect them early in the transition period. Incorporating GHS helps eliminate confusion created by conflicting national and international requirements. It standardizes the format for the SDSs or safety data sheets. It improves chemical labeling, and that improves worker safety. Please remember, as you enter client work sites, not all of our clients use the same chemicals. You will receive site-specific training on the chemicals that are used at each client location. Please ask your account manager or your on-site supervisor if you have any questions regarding this training.